to the campuses. Powell's memo was both a direct response to Roosevelt's battle cry decades earlier and a response to the tumult of the 1960s. He wrote, quote, "No thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack," end quote. When Sindor and the Chamber received the Powell memo, corporations were growing tired of their second-class status in America. Even though the previous 40 years had been a time of great growth and strength for the American economy and America's middle-class workers, and a time of sure and steady increases in profits for corporations, CEOs felt something was missing. If they could only find a way to wiggle back into the people's minds who were just beginning to forget the Royalists' previous exploits in the 1920s that had crashed our economy, then they could get their tax cuts back. They could trash the burdensome regulations that were keeping the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat safe. And the banksters among them could inflate another massive economic bubble to make themselves all mind-bogglingly rich. It could, if done right, be a return to the roaring 20s. But how could they do this? How could they convince Americans to take another shot at what was widely considered a dangerous free market ideology and economic framework, and that Americans once knew preceded every great crash and war? But Lewis Powell had an answer, and he reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, the hub of corporate power in America, with a strategy. As Powell wrote, strength lies in organization, in careful long-range planning and implementation, in consistency of action over an indefinite period of years, in the scale of financing available only through joint effort, and in the political power available only through unified action and national organizations. Thus, Powell said, the role of the National Chamber of Commerce is therefore vital. And out of the Powell memo came all these think tanks and judicial programs, college campus programs. He reshaped America, and it led directly to the Buckley versus Vallejo decision.
Is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Friday. It's Anything Goes Friday, whatever you'd like to talk about. Our number, 202-808-9925. That said, there are a few things that I'd like to talk about. The 1%. Actually, I want to start someplace else. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But back when George W. Bush was president, so this was at least 10 years ago. So it was, let's see, I wrote Unequal Protection in 2001, as I recall. 2000 and 2001, it was published in 2002. And I was invited to Oxford University in the UK, in Britain, to give a speech about corporate personhood in the United States and how it was presenting itself in other countries, including the UK. And I showed up, and it was a very big deal. I mean, it was a great honor. And the president of the college that was sponsoring us, as I recall, it was Christ Church, but I could be wrong. But the president of the college had a private dinner for me afterwards with a whole bunch of the various department heads, and it was really cool. But what happened, what was just fascinating to me, this must have been like 2004. It was in that neighborhood, maybe 2003. It was right after Bush invaded Iraq, or in the year after he had invaded Iraq. So I show up at the university, and they take me to the hall where I'm speaking, and it's like something out of an old movie. You know, this thing was probably, the building was probably built 200 years ago. It's like, it's all, granite and looks sort of like a giant cathedral sort of thing. And the hall that I'm in is, with the, like the old Roman amphitheaters, with the tiered seats going up, so that the people sitting at the very top, at the top row, are like 20 feet above my head, and I'm on the stage out in front. And there was maybe 200 people there, and most of them, the vast majority of them, were students. They were people in their early 20s. And I'm there to talk about corporate personhood in my new book, Unequal Protection. But what happens is, literally, and we all use that word way too much, but anyhow, what happened was, before I could speak about corporate personhood, I got essentially heckled. And not in a bad way. but in a, where do you stand? The young people in the room, the students, started yelling, where do you stand on Bush? And words to that effect. What are your thoughts on Bush? Tell us what about the Iraq War? Is your president crazy? Stuff like that. And literally, well, there I go again, wouldn't let me get into my talk until I addressed that issue. And, presumably a lot of people of a lot of different political persuasions and opinions come through Oxford and, they just wanted to know what's your deal. So I said, okay, let me just be on the record. I did not vote for George W. Bush. I do not like George W. Bush. I think he represents our country poorly. I am embarrassed by him. And, I think he's promulgating a vision of America as kind of the ugly American all across the world. And there was, polite applause, and then everybody kind of sat down and shut up and let me do my hour-long presentation on corporate personhood, which was what I was there to do. And I kind of feel like we're in the same place. Louise and I were talking about this morning, and in fact, it was her suggestion that I discuss this, and I think it was spot on right. Where the rest of the world is looking at us going, really? The President of the United States is picking a fight with this little guy in this little country and threatening nuclear holocaust to one of our allies? I mean, if you take out North Korea, you're taking out South Korea. You're killing 28,000 American troops or more, and possibly millions of people in Seoul and the rest of South Korea. The story in right-wing circles right now that's going around, the Republican story, is, oh, finally somebody's talking tough, right? Trump is going to scare the hell out of them because they're going to think he's crazy. And because they think he's crazy, they're going to be afraid to do anything, and everything's going to be just wonderful. Now, one of the advantages of being an old fart like I am is that I remember when part of Richard Nixon's theory was that, in fact, part of his sales pitch, I don't recall if it was the election of 68 or the election of 72. I'm pretty sure it was the election of 72. In both cases, he said he had a secret plan to end the war. It turns out his secret plan in 68 was to sabotage the peace deal that LBJ had worked out because he was running against LBJ's vice president, Hubert Humphrey. But my recollection is that his secret peace deal in 72 was never clearly articulated, but what his front people were saying, basically, was, Nixon's a madman. He could use nukes. North Vietnam better surrender quick. And the whole Christmas bombing and everything else, all this stuff, that it was all, that this is what was going on. And for a while, that was like, Republicans held that up like, this is a good thing. That the leaders of North Vietnam think that our president is insane. And those of you old enough to remember, the Vietnam War, you probably remember what I'm talking about. And I've heard, read conservative commentators saying that Donald Trump is doing the Nixon thing. He's trying to scare the hell out of Kim Jong-un to say, hey, I'm a crazy man. I don't care. I'll fire off nukes. And that's a good thing. And the last time we were told that was a good thing, about 2 million Vietnamese died. And as I recall, 56,000 American soldiers died. Or at least the 20,000 or so that died after Nixon got elected. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on, what your thoughts are on that. And I'll tell you, these are mine. I think this is not a wise strategy. I think it may play well with Trump's base, and that's the problem. just like Nixon was running for re-election, and his numbers were not all that great in 72, although, George McGovern turned out to be, largely because of the Tom Eagleton fiasco. The Democrat was George McGovern, and his first vice presidential candidate turned out he'd had electroconvulsive shock therapy, which is typically only done with pretty severe depression, which at that time was considered a terrible mental illness. And so he had to dump Eagleton and get whoever he got. It's been a long time. I don't remember who it was. But in any case, but still, Nixon still had some serious currents going against him. And I think that Trump and his advisors are thinking the same. I mean, keep in mind, Roger Stone, who advised Nixon, is advising Trump. Before he died, Roger Ailes, who advised Nixon, was advising Trump. So there's a bunch of old Nixon guys around Trump, and Trump is playing the Nixon thing from Vietnam. And I would like to remind us all that Vietnam did not turn out well. And I don't see, Pence doing anything, but I don't see any, savior here other than common sense and rationality. And frankly, it's kind of ironic, but but the media story on Kim Jong-un is that he's a crazy, he's 33 years old, that he's a crazy kid. The reality is he's not a crazy kid. Kim Jong-un came to power when he was 27 years old, controlling a totally despotic state. He had two older brothers who were both in the line of succession from his father. He succeeded in politically outmaneuvering both of them to the point that when he was 27, he became the head of North Korea. And he immediately set about killing or silencing his opposition and consolidating his power. He has economically slightly loosened the strings of power in North Korea, which has allowed that country to grow. Their annual GDP growth rate has been running between 7% and 9%, as well as anybody can figure. So, he might even be popular in his country. It's hard to tell because anybody who speaks out against him is instantly put to death. But my point is that, here's the irony, is that I'm not relying on Donald Trump to be the rational one who's going to save us from nuclear war. I'm relying on Kim Jong-un because he has a finely tuned survival sense. He has survived this far, this long, and his family, the 2 generations before him, did the same thing. He is not an idiot. He may be, you've been growing up thinking you're the descendant of the sun god and all this kind of stuff. He's probably got a very, very bizarre and twisted mind, but he knows how to run his country, at least the way he wants to. Now, none of this should be construed as praise for Kim Jong-un. The guy's one of the planet's worst murderous tyrants. But here's the bizarre thing is when one of the planet's worst murderous tyrants is more reassuring to you than the President of the United States, that should be some kind of absolute bottom line reference point where you say, there's something wrong here. Let's have a conversation about that 25th Amendment thing and putting together a panel of people who can determine, as the 25th Amendment provides for. It can either be the president's cabinet or Congress can create a panel of people who will sit down and say, this guy is not fit for office. Or maybe if, in the 2018 elections, if, the world is still here, and if the Republicans get wiped out, maybe the party will turn against Trump. But this is not a good situation.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
A few other things I want to talk about. This great piece in Common Dreams, the 1% is organized and coming for their tax cuts. Is the resistance ready? Doesn't look like it. We'll be back. And welcome back. Irene in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Hey, Irene, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to make an observation that I don't think anyone else has caught yet regarding Trump's reaction to the raid on Manafort's house. When he was asked what he thought about that or what his reaction was, he said that a message was sent.
Right. He said it was a strong reaction that sent a message.
And why would somebody as just an observer say that unless they were actually the intended recipient of that message, and he's indicating that he got it loud and clear?
Yeah, I think you're right. It was real interesting to watch him because his thought processes are fairly transparent. I mean, you can just watch his face and know pretty much what he's thinking. And he was clearly trying to avoid saying, it's outrageous, these guys were jackbooted thugs, although I bet anything that's what he was thinking. And he got to be supportive of law enforcement, got to act like everything's fine, and But I think I think that was the point when the news came out. What, 2 days ago was it? Mm-hmm. That when it leaked out that the FBI actually kicked in Manafort's bedroom door, which means that they had already kicked in his front door at like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. That I think that was the point at which a lot of people inside the orbit of the Trump campaign probably had a come to Jesus moment, had a deep swallow, and gulp. I think you're onto something. Irene, thank you for the call. Well said. Appreciate it. Bob, watching Free Speech TV in Farmington, Missouri. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I don't think Trump's bluffing. I think he's going to nuke North Korea.
That's my concern.
Yeah, mine too. I don't want to see this happen, but I don't think we can stop it.
Wow. Well, this was sort of my point, that the guy who can stop it is Kim Jong-un, and he needs to dial back, and his self-preservation instinct will,
we hope,
hopefully, and probably lead him to do so.
We hope.
Yeah. Well, I think the big event here is when China weighed in. China weighed in this morning, and they said that if the United States strikes North Korea first, then we are in a nuclear war with China. They didn't say it in those words, but you could clearly read that from it. And on the other hand, if North Korea strikes the United States first, then China has taken a hands-off approach, which means if Kim is crazy enough to actually hit you guys, take him out. But otherwise, you're in a fight with China, and that's some pretty sobering stuff. I would hope that Trump is taking that very, very seriously. And then the question becomes, okay, if North Korea throws a missile without a warhead in the vicinity of Guam, which I'm assuming we're claiming 200 miles of territorial waters around Guam. Typically, we do. So basically into U.S. waters. Is that considered, in Trump's mind, enough of a provocation to nuke North Korea? And I'm guessing the answer is no, but we'll see. Bob, thank you for the call. I mean, the big concern is that Trump is doing this based on ego rather than based on policy. And if that's the case, then dangerous time. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independee through the branch of gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the branch of gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the branch of gratitude today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, so the Korea thing, the added piece to this, my question, do you feel like the ugly American? And I know that there are Trump supporters out there who are just like super happy to hear Donald Trump say, I know you talked that way to previous presidents. In other words, that Democrat Barack Obama and that wimpy George W. Bush. But now you're talking to me. Right. And so there's some folks out there who are going, yeah, that's what we want. We want a tough guy in the White House. Well, generally speaking, I don't have a problem with a tough guy in the White House as long as the tough guy is doing rational policy. Franklin Roosevelt fought World War II. Millions of people died. It was a god-awful, horrific war. He ordered just the firebombing of Dresden was as consequential an event in terms of human life and mass destruction as was the bombing of Hiroshima. The firebombing of Tokyo, for that matter, was about equally destructive. We've had tough guys in the White House before. Jack Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. But they didn't beat their chests. They didn't do the I alpha male thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. And that Kim Jong-un is doing. Or maybe not. Maybe Kim is just, doing the thing he's always done. I don't know. But anyhow, China came out this morning, or overnight, or last night, and it's one of the less well-publicized events, but I thought it was an amazing thing. And just made it very, very real. China, which presumably has nuclear weapons and the ability to deploy them, China came out and said that if North Korea strikes us first, they are hands off. That was a message directed to Kim. You poke the United States, you hit the United States, all bets are off. On the other hand, China said, if the United States strikes North Korea first, we're at war with China. Do you have any idea what the consequences of a war with China would be, given how dependent we are on them for everything? We cannot build a cruise missile or a submarine or an aircraft carrier or even an airplane without parts from China. We have outsourced to China the core of our technology and the essence of our manufacturing capability. It was a stupid policy from the get-go. I know this is Reagan's great dream, arguably Nixon's great dream. The Republicans have been pushing for this forever. It's the whole libertarian thing. No borders, right? Who needs borders? All you need is oligarchs. Just billionaires to control everything, and wonderful life. Life will be great. But that's not how, it's not how it worked out.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It didn't work out well. It did work out that we've got the oligarchs running the world, and a bunch of them are in China now, too. We'll be right back with you. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Rebooting the American Dream, 11 Ways to Rebuild Our Country, Chapter 4, An Informed and Educated Electorate. It opens with a quote from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That, whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right. Talk Media News Service, based here in Washington, D.C., is owned and run by my dear friend Ellen Ratner. Ellen is an experienced and accomplished journalist, and a large number of interns and young journalism school graduates get their feet wet in reporting by working with and for her. In March of 2010, I was in Washington for a meeting with a group of senators, and I needed a studio from which to do my radio and TV show. Ellen was gracious enough to offer me hers. I arrived as three of her interns were producing a panel discussion type of TV show for web distribution at talkmedianews.com, in which they were discussing their viewing audience, their recent experiences on Capitol Hill. One intern panelist related that a White House correspondent for one of the big three networks had told her that the network registered a huge amount of interest in a hot story that week of a congressman's sexual indiscretions. Far less popular were stories about the debates on health care, the conflicts in the Middle East, and even the Americans who had recently died in Iraq or Afghanistan. Quote, so that's the story they have to run with on the news, end quote, the intern said, relating the substance of the network correspondent's thoughts, because that's what the American people want to see. If the network doesn't give people what they want to see, viewers will tune away. The network won't get any ratings or revenues or viewers. The other two interns commiserated with the first about what a shame it was that Americans wanted the titillating stories instead of the substantive ones, but they accepted without question that the network was therefore obligated to give people what they want. When they finished their panel discussion, I asked these college students if they knew that there was a time in America when radio and television stations and networks broadcast the actual news instead of infotainment because the law required them to. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. They were mystified. Why would a station or network broadcast programs that were not popular or not what people wanted? But the reality is that from the 1920s, when radio really started to go big in the United States, until Reagan rolled it back in 1987, federal communications law required a certain amount of public service programming from radio and television stations as a condition of retaining their broadcast licenses. The agreement was basic and simple. In exchange for the media owners being granted an exclusive license from the Federal Communications Commission to use the airwaves owned by the public, they had to serve the public interest first. And only then could they go about the business of making money with the rest of their programming throughout the day. If they didn't do so, if they didn't serve the public interest, when it came time to renew their license, public groups and individuals could show up at a public hearing on the license renewal and argue for the license being denied. One small way the stations lived up to their public service mandate was by airing public service announcements, PSAs, for local nonprofit groups and community events and charitable causes. But they also had to abide by something called the Fairness Doctrine, which required them to air diverse points of view on controversial issues. Separately, during election campaigns, broadcasters had to abide by the equal time rule, which required them to provide equal airtime to rival candidates during an election. But the biggest way they proved that they were providing a public service and meeting the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine was by broadcasting the news, real news, actual news, local, national, and international news produced by professional old-school journalists. Because the news didn't draw huge ratings like entertainment shows, although tens of millions of Americans did watch it every night on TV and listen to it at the top of the hour on radio from coast to coast. And because real news is expensive to produce, with bureaus and correspondents all over the world, news was a money loser for the big three TV networks and for most local and radio and TV stations. But it was such a sacred thing. That is, after all, the keystone that held together the station's license to broadcast and thus to do business. It didn't matter if the news lost money. It made all the other money-making things possible. Through much of the early 1970s, I worked in the newsroom of a radio station in Lansing, Michigan. It had been started and was then run by three local guys, an engineer, a salesman, and a radio broadcaster. They split up the responsibilities like you would expect, and all were around the building most days and would hang out from time to time with the on-air crew, all except the sales guy. I was forbidden from talking with him because I worked in news. There could be no hint, ever, anywhere, that our radio station had violated the FCC's programming in the public interest mandate by, for example, by going easy on an advertiser in a news story or promoting another advertiser in a different story. News had to be news, separate from profit and revenue, and if it wasn't, I'd be fired on the spot. News, in other words, was not part of the free market. It was part of our nation's intellectual commons, and thus the price of the station's license. After Reagan blew up the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, two very interesting things happened. The first was the rise of right-wing hate speech talk radio, starting with Rush Limbaugh that very year. The second, which really stepped up fast after President Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which further deregulated the broadcast industry, was that the money-losing news divisions of the big three TV networks were taken out of the wings of their entertainment divisions and wrung dry. Foreign bureaus were closed, reporters were fired, stories that promoted the wonders of advertisers or other countries like big movie production houses owned by the same mega corporations that own the networks began to appear, and investigative journalism that cast a bright light on corporate malfeasance vanished. So the chapter is an informed and educated electorate. It's about our media in rebooting the American dream. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, What an amazing day. What an amazing, amazing day. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's time for Article 4 of the 25th Amendment, maybe past time, really. And, this situation with North Korea is really troubling because let me tell you what. Donald Trump is, he's who he is. He's 70 years old. His certain mental faculties might be deteriorating, but it's really not the most troubling part. The most troubling part are his advisors. His advisors they just simply don't have the confidence that Nixon's or Bush's advisors had. Like Bush, case in point, Richard Painter and General Hayden have made very...
And Nixon had Henry Kissinger, and regardless of what you may think about Kissinger's ethos, he understood world politics. Although the way they screwed up Vietnam, you have to wonder.
Well, and just let me put it to you this way. This would be the quickest way. I did this analysis for 25 years. All right. Over the weekend, there was a story that Trump retweeted a classified story about the North Koreans loading anti-ship.
Right. It was Fox News leaking a story as they were complaining about leaks. Yes.
Well, all right.
Trump retweeted it.
We as Americans prefer certain cartoons, right? We like Kim Jong-un. Our picture of him is cartoonish. Kim Jong-un is more than likely got himself into trouble with his general staff. Okay, the military is what really is the power behind the policy in North Korea. And a lot of those generals are very old. So anyways, I'll come straight to the point. I'm worried about the USS Blue Ridge. Because if you look at North Korea, has a very, very easy to predict pattern, okay? And this nuclear or this missile talk about Guam does make sense at a certain level, okay, because of the Air Force base there in Guam. But the Blue Ridge is more than likely what I would be worried about.
Where is the Blue Ridge?
The USS Blue Ridge.
Where is it?
It's out of Japan.
It's in Japan?
I'm sorry? Yes. And it is a very important command and control vessel, and I'm quite sure the North Koreans are aware of that. And like I said,
so you're afraid that they will take that out because it's command and control for the Pacific Fleet or something?
Well, I think they understand our strategy in the event of a war. Okay,
yeah.
And it would make sense, all right, if they time that with the upcoming, war games with South Korea, and it makes legal sense from their perspective. Okay, not from ours, but from their perspective, it makes legal sense.
Yeah.
And this could. But anyways, my point is this whole thing is very dangerous, and it can spin out of control. And I am worried about eventually, China becoming forced, to become involled.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Do you recall when these war games are supposed to start?
They're going to start this month. They changed the name. When I was in, it was Ulchi Focus Lens was the name of it. They're a routine war game. It's Viper something or the other now. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be this month, and these war games are provocative. But like I said, North Korea does have a pattern, right? And it's from their perspective. It's from their interpretation of international law. But you hit the nail on the head. We have a cartoonish perception of Kim Jong-un and the Kim family in general. All right, and I think Americans just prefer it. They prefer, to make Saddam Hussein out of everybody. Even Saddam Hussein wasn't Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
yeah, he was a fairly complex character who was writing a 3-volume love novel when he was taken out. I think the important point here is that Kim, number one, China has drawn a line in the sand here. And Kim himself, and this is the other story that is not making the American press the way it should, Kim himself has offered a proposal to end all this. He has said that he will freeze his nuclear and missile program if we'll stop doing the war games off the coast of North Korea. A freeze for a freeze is what they called it. And, China is supportive of that. So, I'm not a foreign policy super wonk, but it seems like maybe for a 12-month period, that wouldn't be a bad idea. We probably learned pretty much everything we need to know from previous war games. I don't know. But anyhow, Dave, thank you for the call. It's good to hear from you. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's on your mind today?
Well, I met someone with 2 PhDs, works for IBM. His specialty is in artificial intelligence, and he is going to Germany.
You mean moving to Germany?
To work for IBM over there.
Mm-hmm.
2 PhDs. I told him what you've said about Germany, and he said everything you said is the exact truth about solar power, about the electric cars, batteries charging the grid during the daytime peak hours.
Oh, that was Denmark, actually. But yeah, I'm sure they're doing some of that in Germany too. Yep.
Okay, and also I asked him about what people say that are neoliberals, and they kind of poo-poo bringing the manufacturing jobs back, and they say because it would all go to robots anyway. And he said, I asked him if that's true, and he said that would increase jobs. There would need to be a lot of people working with developing the robot technology.
Sure. Somebody's got to build the robots. Somebody has to maintain the robots. Somebody has to fix the robots. Somebody has to recycle the robots when they break down.
Absolutely. And I did actually find a website, Recode, that specializes in science and technology that backed that up and said last year, for the first time in decades, more jobs were brought back in manufacturing, 25,000 net gain, and that that even with robots eventually taking away a lot of those jobs, that jobs are coming back in manufacturing and also electronic, but it's the big items that are too expensive to ship. And the reason they're coming back is foreign investment and new plants. Yep. So why can't we?
Well, they're also coming back. They're also coming back because after the last crash, when GM got revived, when President Obama saved General Motors, they came back and they said, we're not going to pay people $40-50 an hour anymore to work on our assembly line. New workers are going to start at $14.50 an hour. And so the wages being paid for manufacturing in the United States now have dropped dramatically. And that is one of the things that's driving or encouraging some companies to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Back to you, Marta.
Shouldn't the Democratic Party then start focusing on supporting unions once again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The number one thing that will build a middle class and build a stable democratic republic, a stable political system, is a strong middle class. And Reaganomics has done nothing but kneecap the middle class. And you look at what Sam Brownback did in Kansas when he doubled down on Reaganomics, it really damaged the middle class. I mean, they're shutting down schools, they're closing down public facilities, things billionaires don't care about, but average working people need. And spot on. Excellent call, Marta. Thank you so much. It's great to hear from you. Mitch in Burton, Washington. Hey, Mitch, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. How you doing?
I'm well. What's up?
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because I'm bringing up a subject that is history, and it's about the Native people, and they're a microcosm of how the U.S. treats the people that are common. And Black Kettle, as you know, went to see Lincoln, along with Cochise, I believe, to Washington. And Lincoln wanted to have good relationship with the natives, so he gave Black Kettle an American flag, and the person that went with him a peace medal. And what happened is, shortly, he did this because he saw the logic in going about living with the new people in the world rather than fighting them. And so he got basically a guarantee from President Lincoln, who believed that the people that were under him would follow his example. Well, as you know, a massacre at Sand Creek occurred. Black Kettle had his American flag on a pole, proudly displayed along with the white flag, and his tribe was attacked and 500 people died.
Right.
And I'm thinking that all this rhetoric today is why China offered peaceful negotiations, because it's the only way out of this. We went to Pyongyang at the end of the Korean War and sat down at the table, finally. We need to do that again.
Yeah, I agree, and it's time for the old cliche, saner heads to prevail. But there's something to it. Mitch, thanks for the call. Yeah, the Native American genocide continues apace in the United States. It's changed its form slightly, just like Jim Crow has changed its form, but they're both still very, very much with us. Racism to the point of genocidal racism is very much part of the American people. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Welcome back. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching.
Hi, Tom. Nice to speak with you on this beautiful day. There is so much that you have, your show has stirred up in me in this last couple of weeks, but one of them in particular that I think is very dangerous, and you touched on it, asking if Trump was competent. And for the reason that there are less educated and there are other rank-and-file members of our military that aren't equipped or that could be persuaded to act independently by his inflammatory speech, that it could create something that has already happened in history but has pretty much been denied and covered up, and that was under Bill Clinton. And
what specifically are you talking about? The Balkans?
Do you remember the nuclear submarine incident over north of Sweden and Norway?
You mean the Russian sub that went down?
Yes, the Kursk, the 200.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Died on it.
Yeah.
And then they after they were dead, there were a lot of economic transfers and stuff like that, and there was apparently a American sub that was damaged, and it actually made it for repairs 2 stops. It made it back to the United States, but it lost its survival buoy. The point I wanted to make was that when Russia went down and cut the nose of that sub off, and there was a hole in it, whether it was they cut it there, but right where a Mark IV torpedo would have hit. So there was some kind of a nuclear submarine incident there, and this brings me to the Trump qualifications that Bill Clinton at the time, bless his soul, used diplomacy to bring us back from the brink. And if that...
In other words, the Russians at that point thought that we had hit their submarine with a missile from another submarine?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And there were economic trade-offs and stuff like that for giving economic debt here in America after that.
Yeah.
And
Clinton did the same thing with North Korea, when he cut that deal in '94 that froze their weapon systems, their nuclear program.
One thing that I wanted to ask you is that the other gentleman that called in about that nuclear sub where the Russian was told to push the button and didn't.
Right.
I wonder...
That wasn't a sub. That was a launch station. But yeah.
That was a launch station. It was not on a submarine?
Well, actually, I shouldn't say that quite so authoritatively. I don't have an article about it in front of me. My recollection is not that specific. Go ahead, Randy.
I would love to know time-wise if that ties into the sinking of the Kursk. And there is a wonderful documentary, if you can find it, and that's the title of it. And it shows the outrage for the Russian citizens at who is in office over there now.
I'm pretty sure that was all pre-falling of the Berlin Wall. That was Soviet Union stuff, not Russian stuff. But I might be wrong.
But it was under Clinton. It was under Clinton. So
well, the curse was under Clinton, but the Russian guy who refused to turn the key and fire a nuclear missile at the United States. My recollection is that was, well, actually, yeah, Clinton was in the 90s. The post wall fell. My recollection is that was Soviet Union, but I could be wrong. Randy, this is not an area where I'm like a super scholar, so I'll have to look it up, and I should check our chat room. Sue's really good about tracking this stuff down. Randy, thanks for the call. We'll talk about it after. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, 50 years ago, thank you, Sue, for that. Sue Nethercutt in our chat room here. Anytime you want to know what's going on our show, just drop into our chat room. It's live. It's free. It's over at our website, thomhartmann.com. Thank you, Vasily Arkhipov, The Man Who Stopped Nuclear War by Edward Wilson. And it was 50 years ago, and that was as of October 2012. So that would have been 55 years ago. So this was 1962. And if you were born before 27 October 1962, Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov saved your life. It was the most dangerous day in history. An American spy plane had been shot down over Cuba while another U-2 got lost and straight into Soviet airspace, etc. And that was the no, we're not going to nuke you soldier. Anyway, Marcia in Inglewood, California. Hey, Marcia, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. I was listening to David Pakman, I think it was last night or the night before. He's on very late. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about it seems to be a coincidence. We didn't know about Paul Manafort's home being invaded by the FBI until, a week or two after?
Until day before yesterday, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But it happened in a week
It happened 2 weeks ago.
Earlier.
Yeah, it happened 2 weeks ago.
The day after Manafort's house was raided is when that tweet came out from him about banning transgender people.
Yeah, it's also,
from the military.
well, I think that might have been 2 days after. Immediately after the raid, or within a day of the raid, Trump was tweeting about Neil McCabe, who is am I remembering his name right? Because we've got a guest whose name is Neil McCabe. But the guy's, it seems like it's the same name anyhow. It's McCabe, who was, in the FBI saying, this guy is a Democratic donor or something like that. Time to fire the heads of the FBI, whatever. Andrew McCabe? Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, but your point, Marcia, do you think the transgender ban tweets were just to distract us from his troubles?
Exactly. That was the inference.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to add to it is impeachment versus Amendment 25. Do you know any length of time it takes for impeachment versus going through the Amendment 25? Because it seems there's certainly grounds for it.
Yeah. Impeachment is a purely political process. It's done by the House of Representatives. They impeach the president, which is basically an indictment, and then a trial is held in the Senate. So the timelines and timescales for both would be determined by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, respectively. Presumably it could be done very, very quickly. If there was overwhelming support for it, I don't think that there is right now in the Republican Party, but I think there may be particularly after next November, if there's huge electoral losses on the Republican side. With regard to the 25th Amendment, the process has to be initiated by one of two groups. And it has to be signed off by the vice president. The vice president has to begin this process, but either the entire cabinet of the senior officials around the president basically say this guy is not capable of executing his office any longer, or Congress establishes a commission or a committee or a group of people to make that decision. That committee makes the recommendation to the vice president. The vice president then makes the recommendation to Congress. And then it takes a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate, to remove the president from office and replace him with the vice president. If he protests, he has 4 days to stop it. So both impeachment and impeachment requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate as well to convict the president.
I remember the Nixon impeachment trials.
There was no trial for Nixon. He resigned to avoid the trial.
He resigned.
Yeah, because he knew he was going to lose.
Brought him to that point.
Yeah, exactly. It was impeachment that took him to resigning, and in fact,
right.
Right up, it was the day before he made the decision to resign. The Republicans in the House and Senate told him that they were actually going to join the Democrats in going for impeachment. So,
but it seems like the Amendment 25 might be a shorter process.
Well, if everybody in his cabinet became convinced he was crazy, and I don't see evidence of that yet, or if Congress was to pass a bill creating that commission, and there is legislation now that has been proposed, I believe, in the House of Representatives, maybe also in the Senate, to create such a commission. And of course, the Republicans are just sitting on it. So, because in the House, it's run basically, Paul Ryan runs it like a dictator. He can stop anything from coming to the floor, and he can force anything onto the floor. And he's not going to do something like that that's going to hurt his own party. Marcia, thanks for the call. Peggy in Rifle, Colorado. Peggy, what's on your mind?
Yes, Tom, this is the first time I've called.
Thank you.
And I listen every day, and I'm really upset over Trump. I'm now ashamed to be a U.S. citizen. I used to be proud to say I was a U.S. citizen. And really, is Trump the best we can do for the president? It makes our government and whole country look ridiculously inferior, downright stupid. Is there any way that
I think that the more, Peggy, the more that the world hears messages from people like you and me saying, essentially, not my president, right? This guy lost the presidential election by 3 million legal votes. And, he won through a technicality having to do with an electoral college that was created to preserve the power of slave states when slaves were considered 3/5 of a human back in the day. And that's the only reason he's president. It's the only reason George W. Bush was president. He lost the popular vote by 500,000 votes. And, these are illegitimate presidencies, in my opinion.
But our networks, our news networks, I just came back from reunions in another state, and people that I have loved and known, and I'm already in nearly 80, all my life, I can no longer even sit down and have a conversation with them because they've become painted idiotic in my mind.
Yeah, this is Jen Seiko's movie, The Brainwashing of My Dad, which you can watch online. This is the power of Fox News. It's extraordinary. They've created a cult following. Peggy, thank you for the call. Wish you the very best. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.